Hello and welcome to Conversations in Close Protection with your hosts Chuck Randall and Chris Story. Our goal is to engage the greater protection community, inspire innovative thought, and as always, continue the conversation around all things close protection.
This is Conversations in Close Protection. My name is Chuck Randolph. Back across the digital divide, the amanuensis of security, Mr. Chris Story.
The immense amanuensis. That sounds awesome.
The
I don't know what it says. I'll have to look it up.
Amanuensis
Amanuensis
of the executive protection field.
I would like, maybe it's emirate.
The emirate of EP.
There it
Mr.
is.
Chris Story. Sir, how are you?
Doctor.
It feels
good,
like mere weeks ago we were sitting in the studios back
Dude,
this way.
It feels like months ago, to be honest with you. It's freaking
Yeah, for sure.
some dog years. Yeah. How are you?
Good. Also been on the road and took a little time off, much needed to read, relax, do a little fishing, hiking, running, hanging out with the family.
Good for you. Yeah. I'm going to do some solo time off here, in a couple, next week, couple days.
Man,
Very excited.
I read this great book. I've already given it away because, I'm happy to give books away if people enjoy them. But dude, if you're looking for a good read, I read this book by this guy, Calvin, called Follow Me to Hell. It's the bicentennial of the Texas Rangers. I identify as a Texan, so I thought I would come in and I've been doing a lot of reading on Texas history. And man, so this guy Calvin writes this book on Texas Rangers and this one Ranger commander named McNelly. I don't want to give anything away. It's a great read. It kind of draws the pre-Texas Rangers to when they were just called militia, pre-Texas being part of the U.S., pre-Texas being its own nation, and then it encompasses all that, and then it kind of goes up to this guy McNelly, who is in some ways like a Leonidas type character. Although he's described as someone who's small in stature, he basically has tuberculosis and all these lung issues, but he continues to survive and thrive, and he is a badass, and
Nice.
unafraid to go after bad guys anywhere.
Nice.
Quick read. Yeah, if you're looking for, I immediately then ordered the same author's book on Daniel Boone, which says it's not the Daniel Boone that you saw on TV if you were a kid and you remember that. So I'm curious to read that. But a great book to take with you if you're going to go get a little downtime. You're looking to have something that is kind of tangential but nothing to do with your day-to-day job.
And is it fiction, or is it loosely based on?
Chris, it's nonfiction. But if you've ever read the book Gates of Fire, you ever read that?
Yeah.
It reads like a fiction book.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and the author does a really good job of like, here's a bunch of stuff I'm putting, and then here's footnotes. So as you read through it, there's footnotes on this guy. He also was the co-author of the book Tombstone.
Oh, really? Nice.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
As you were walking through it, it reminded me of. I was like, oh yeah, Tombstone. Like that little badass.
Oh, and there are some Tombstone moments where I was like, at one point, like, this is something I appreciate about my wife. She's patient. We're like driving. I'm like, honey, you got to listen to this. And she patiently is like, yeah, cool. Thank you. And then I'm like, no, you got to listen to this. She's like, okay.
No.
And then I realized like, all right, I'll just shut my mouth and live in my own headspace, which
she's just giving
headspace and time.
She's giving me a little,
I'm driving. Just let me drive. Listen to my country music. You'll be fine.
Yep.
You've been on the road though, dude.
Dude, like nobody's business.
Yeah, it's
put it this way: I moved in the at the beginning of
new studio. Yeah, you're in a new studio. Yeah.
Yeah. I moved in the beginning of June. I think I spent 3 days at home. Ridiculous.
I remember back in the day, air quotes there, people were talking about the movie The Bodyguard with Kevin Costner, all the joking aside. I said, the one thing that movie gets right is when he comes in off the road and there's like a shit pile of mail that he's got to go through. I'm like, 100% he got that right. Especially for those of you that travel and, you know that sometimes you get back and, there's like a ton and a half of mail. You got to go through emails and everything. So that, and I think in, what was the movie about the EOD guys?
With Jeremy Renner.
Yeah. Why can't I think of
Hurt Locker?
Hurt Locker. The one scene, I think that's a great movie. There's some clear issues with it, but one thing I think they get 100% accurate is when he's standing in the cereal aisle after deployment, and his wife's like, "Just pick something out," and he's like, I'm like, "Yes, nailed it." Anyways, we haven't caught up. Last time we recorded, you were getting ready to go to the inaugural BEP conference.
Yep.
And I think you left CiCP Studios Austin and you headed there. I mean,
I went directly there.
How was it?
It was good. It was good. It was interesting because, obviously a lot of the folks that we see at the Close Protection Conference were there, but there was a significant amount of folks that and faces that I hadn't never met and I hadn't seen, and that was an interesting thing. I missed the first day because I had to work, but the second day was good. Some great presentations. Some of them, as with anything, it's hard to get all the presentations right, but I thought some valuable presentations, and they had a discussion with the board at the end where they just talked about business and doing some different things and kind of weighed in. So it was good. It was good overall. They definitely did a lot of things right with what, with how they presented it. I thought they did well, and I think if they continue to do so, they'll do bigger and better things as they move forward. They kind of walk through some of the whys for the what, why did you have it in Kansas City, and why did you have it in this, and why did you do this? And so, they had some international visitors. The folks for Kansas City was, where's right in the middle of the country, so everybody has to share the same travel pain. They did some really good things. So I thought it was a great event, and look forward for more things to come out of them.
Yeah, I was sad to have missed it, but I had made some family promises before, and some things you can't get back. So I think it's important for that priority. So I look forward to attending stuff in the future. And by all everything I hear, it sounded like it was a great conference and a lot of good information, networking, all the things. We need more of that.
Yeah, and there were some very high level presentations, I thought, as well, and I thought that was very that was welcome, So it was somewhat of a different audience. A lot of former feds were there, and a lot of formers, that were representing their organizations. So that was a little bit different because there was a lot of that. There weren't a whole lot of new practitioners there at all, which I think is by design. I think that's the EP Squared's kind of focus.
Well, was it a standards conference or was it a conference?
It was more of a conference. I think there was some feedback that folks were looking for the standards discussion, but it was a conference. At least to be fair, I missed the first day, so I wasn't really. I don't believe that they had that thing, but the other piece is it's interesting is that it goes to show you just how small the industry really is, where you have a group of people that are, the core group of folks that and you end up seeing it at a Close Protection Conference, and then those people all, you see those kind of same personalities as you go to this other conference, and all those people all go to dinner. They're like, hey, the group is going to dinner, or there's people going to dinner, and then you literally all end up at the same place, even you don't really, it's not necessarily planned. So it was pretty interesting. Again, hats off to them. They did a good job. And again, we'll look forward to see more. It would be nice to understand what the standards piece is, and how much work they've done on that. But again, that's for them to put out whenever they're ready.
Sure. And I'm sure when they will. I mean, I don't remember either James or Jerry talking that it was going to be completely focused on standards, but maybe more of a conference to bring everybody together and start that conversation. So sounds like It was a good first footing.
Yeah.
And I think between like that, and then you have the Close Protection Conference in the UK, you have the Close Protection Conference in Mexico, and then of course the big dance in December down in Texas with the IPSB's Close Protection Conference. I think that's a good. I think that's a good spread of activities for this industry to make sure that we stay in tune and in touch throughout the year.
Yeah, I think if people are looking for other conferences to go to or to get other perspective, I would say, again, there's that perception that it's us versus them, that proverbial us versus them, not, as if all the conferences are competing. And I think that's incorrect. I think that people should take the opportunity to go to like Fellum's, EP and Close Protection Technology, or the Close Protection Conference in the UK, and the one because you really get a very, very different perspective on the cultural aspects and impacts of protection, right? Like, so the UK being, mostly seasonal and mostly around, footballers, or at least those folks who attend those, right? And their version of a high net worth person versus our version of a high net worth person, and what those things look like. And I think it gives a lot of clarity and perspective in what people are talking about when they're bringing their cultural perspective to the table. And I think that, thankfully and fortunately for us, or at least from my lens, I've been exposed to a lot more, and it gives you much of a broader perspective, of the industry at large, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, look, I go back to Musashi. I mean, he didn't learn one sword technique and say, cool, that's it, I'm done, it's me or nothing. I mean, he continued to go and find different schools, and he continued to strive to learn, and I think to be a good practitioner, you need to have that attitude. And that attitude also includes cultural diversity, technical and tactical diversity in strategies. I mean, just, if you see everything through a straw, then you have a very, very finite view, and you might miss some new initiative or something new that's coming around. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I hit up, I also, since we've talked last, I had an opportunity to attend Association of International Risk Intelligence Professionals, AIRRIP's 6th annual Global Intel Forum.
Nice.
Normally it's held in Chicago. This time it was held outside of Denver. Once again, a great event. This is a tangential industry to say the protection industry. A lot of the folks at AIRRIP are offering intelligence support to protective services, and it's a vital partnership. I would say, to the close protection industry. Always good. They had some folks from the government who came in and spoke about intelligence and technology. There was conversations about using intelligence at events, conversations about upping your game, career advancement and leadership and intelligence, and as usual, great networking events. A lot of, again, it's another forum where you can get a good, different perspective on things happening in the same field that we're dealing in. This large corporate security or organizational security, whether you're in protective operations or protective intelligence operations. I mean, we're all kind of hanging out in the same pool. We're just doing different things. So I think it's always good to go to some of those as well and gain perspective, as you say, from what some of our peers in other industries are saying.
Yeah, I think like you said, if you only come from one point of view, you only have that perspective. I mean, I think that's what we see a lot of times, when we talk about people coming from those institutions, where you spent this much time in a, military, government, whatever, even could be a house of worship, whatever. You only look through things through that lens, and you tend to ignore everything else, because if it doesn't meet your standard of what excellence looks like, then everything else, nothing else will matter, right? And that part is pretty challenging, because I think, when you've had a broad perspective, you can see rather quickly positives and negatives, or pros and cons to each, and having that narrow viewpoint isn't necessarily helpful at times. But I think we're getting together. And I think what's happening too is that a lot of government folks who think that they have this gigantic, network, they come to some of the other organizations in the corporate space and like, holy shit, this actually rivals what we put together, because this organization needs to protect their own, right, and they need to protect their assets and resources, et cetera, and their intelligence apparatus, aside from maybe human, freaking rivals, some of their other systems. So that piece is pretty awakening for them, or eye-opening for them.
And people look, I'm focused on my job for 20 years, whether, let's say I'm in the government space or the corporate space. I got heads down. I'm at .gov or .com, and I've been doing it. And then all of a sudden I come out, I'm getting ready to retire. I want to do my next thing. And I'm like, okay, here I am. I was somewhere for 20 years. And you walk out and you realize, like, holy Moses, this room is a lot bigger than I thought it was.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe get ready for it, folks. Maybe I'm not the biggest player here.
Right. Well, I mean, I think
rough to take sometimes, but it's reality. But I think you have to go and understand, like, look, I only know one small area of this major industry. If you think, there are people. I think the protection industry is far greater and wider than we even understand, because there's people all over the world doing it. We just may not like, hey, look, we're not, paying attention to somebody in Africa or somebody in Indonesia that's doing it, but there are people nugging it out every day, getting paid to protect the principal. We're probably facing far more imminent threats than most.
Correct. Yeah. It's funny you say that.
Training and resources.
Right. Correct. Right. So I think it's interesting, especially because, and I know we're going to get into it with this discussion today, but it helps us move it forward. Is one of the things. So I recently did a state event, right, and you really understand. Yeah, super fun, right? But
yep.
But not right. I mean, at the end of the day, because all of the gov people are inside the fence doing their thing, and all of the freaking savages are outside the fence doing their thing, and if that fence is very, very, it's a very, very stark line, because what happens inside, they're responsible for. One step out, guess who's responsible? The guys on the outside, right? Not them, and that's the big piece that everybody has to understand.
It's an interesting
understanding to focus on that piece.
And it's an interesting, and I'm going to use purposeful word here. It's an interesting orchestra of security.
Oh, God,
because you have the horn section on the inside, and then you have the winds or the strings or whatever you want to use on the outside. They have to work in concert, and if they don't, it creates a din, and it could create very bad things. So you're right. And this, even if it's just the understanding of, like, I've got you on the gate, he or she has walked inside, they're good to go. You're at the presidential or state dinner or whatever it is. And then when they come back, I need to fully understand. And that's, again, where I think, like, going back to conferences and stuff like that and networking and understanding, cool, if something bad happens inside that fence line, I'm not getting in. Don't care. Right. I'm not getting in. Right. But there needs to be some understanding, so I at least understand where, if something bad happens, are they going to eject these people? Where can I start, having some modicum of control around entry, exit, where I need to have my car? I remember being at a state dinner, Chris, and I won't out anybody, but yourself, you've done it many times. There's a bit of a ballet around the White House to get in and out and do other things. And, if you come in, it's like my way or the highway, and this is what we did it. You're going to get the stiff arm, and you're going to make it much harder on your principal.
Exactly.
And then you're going to hear about it later. Yeah. So I remember we figured it out. We did whatever we did, which worked, and got everyone in. And then I walked across the street at a certain area, and I was keeping eyes on the gate, and we had cars, and, we won't go into the whole, and I was standing there, and actually, when I walk up to my observation point, I look over, and someone I know who's also from him as well, and I look over and I'm like, of course you're here. And he's like, yeah, it's the only LPOP to be, which is listening post, observation post, for those that don't know. So we're standing there. Up comes another multinational. It is Keystone Cops. They all jump out of the car in a diamond formation on the main highway, trying to disrupt traffic, trying to get their principal out. You already see the CAT team walking across the grounds, like, oh, what's going on here? This is a commotion. they all try to get into the gate with the principal. There's a kerfuffle, a logistical kerfuffle, and they're all stiff-armed, and their principal goes away, and you see them all walk away dejected. And then I heard later that the principal lit into him for like, hey, dude, it's called advance work. Do it.
Right.
Make a call. Call
Yeah.
Roxanne. Call somebody. Ask what the hell the deal is there. So.
Exactly. Well, that's the funny thing is too, is that it's like you said, when you get there, you're like, oh, you're here too. Like, why wouldn't I be? Right? All of that.
The thing is, and then
you
like,
gotta freaking do your homework.
And you walk around and like, oh, you know other people who get it and have actually taken the time to assess and evaluate and make an operational plan. Like, this is where I'm going to go to be dropped, to have eyes on, or I'm going to have an asset here. I'll park my cars here. And, we could probably do a whole podcast on advanced work and getting outside of the checklist and operational planning. But I mean, yeah. So
that's the big piece too, is just you got to have a plan, because you have zero authority and zero weight at all. Because anybody that comes up with a badge that goes, hey, you need to move, or hey, we're locking this down, or hey, we're, whatever.
Yeah.
You're screwed.
But hey, man, I'm here with, I don't care. There's always somebody that's going to trump you.
Yep. And here's the other thing is, 9 out of 10 of those people have no idea why they're there or what they're doing. They just know what they're supposed to do, and that's it. And you don't belong there. They don't know how long the person's going to be. They don't know how long they're supposed to be there. They don't know anything. They just know that, hey, I'm supposed to lock down this road for the next, until somebody tells me to go away. So you can either stay here or you can leave. Right. And that's it.
We have 2 choices. Neither of them are you here. So. All right. Well, anyways, that's awesome. I love me a good state dinner, especially if you have less than 24 hours notice. You've been summoned. Here, let's go. Let's get it on.
That was my life, Chuck. That was my life.
I feel you, my friend. I feel you.
Dude, but here's how it worked. I was going to the elevator on the 16th floor. When I was entering the elevator on the 16th floor, I was supposed to stay in Florida. Okay. As I got out on the ground floor, I was heading to DC. That's how fast it happens,
Yep. I've been there at lunch where like, what are you doing? Eating lunch? No, you're not. Okay, what am I doing? You're going to DC. When? In an hour. We went ahead and booked your flight. Yeah. Oh, okay. That is, well, those are the days of your suit carrier go bag. And I don't mean the kind that had my everyday carry. I mean the kind that had my everyday suit ready to go.
Pretty much.
Yeah. But this is July Shop Talk. I mean, I don't even think we mentioned that at the beginning. So I think we have some news.
Some stuff and things to go over. So I think the first thing would obviously be the gigantic coup or coup attempt in Russia, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of a big deal. Interesting from a protective standpoint, especially as we talked about, state and state events, et cetera, is that, suddenly they're focused on an internal threat. And again, if you think about it, something like this hasn't really happened since like World War II, where suddenly these are our allies and then suddenly they're not. Like it's the stuff that movies are made of, right? Like, hey, our contracted entity is now pissed off and now they're coming for us, So it's very, very interesting.
Well, it was interesting to me, and you and I had talked about it briefly. I was on vacation, but this popped up, so of course I was kind of following it just out of personal interest and professional interest. I was thinking about the French Foreign Legion, and I'm not comparing, Tommy, don't call me, I'm not comparing the French Foreign Legion to Wagner, but I'm just saying you have a group that has known criminal elements and other things that have brought inside of it, and at some point they just say, hey, look, enough is enough. We're going to march and send a strong message. Mm-hmm. And I think a strong message was sent, and then at some point either somebody like sobered up or got a phone call and said, we're about to tactical nuke all you guys. But you're right. We haven't seen anything like that, where all of a sudden, look, our number one asset, tip of the spear, if you will, who's probably giving us our biggest momentum on an offensive, is turned around and pointed at us now.
Right.
Well, wait a minute. Did their check bounce? What happened?
Right. Right. So I think that's an interesting piece, especially for those who are in the contract space. Again, I think historically, U.S. contractors are primarily defensive. Matter of fact,
Hmm.
yeah. So defensive. So that piece doesn't necessarily come into play for us. That I think that's a big and a significant difference between, us and Wagner. However, the protective piece, again, if your check doesn't clear, your protection team can walk away. So
Yeah.
that piece becomes a very, very, you got to keep the people who are keeping you protected. You got to keep them happy and safe, et cetera. So that part's pretty interesting.
Well, it's also, I mean, from a military point of view as well, there's also a statement there about, people kind of make fun of logistics. But if you can't keep, I mean, bad things happen when you can't maintain momentum, and momentum is maintained by understanding the amount of resources that need to be trickled to the front of the operation to make sure momentum happens. In other words, you got to keep gas in the car to keep it moving.
Right.
And if there's a moment at which gas starts running out, then, cars start to sputter, things start to happen. And I think we saw that play out here too. Like, hey, we didn't get the ammo we wanted. You fired on there's a lot of missteps that are going on at some point.
Right.
There's clearly some frustration. Of course, neither you or I know what's going on behind the scenes. This could be one big false flag operation for all we know, but I somehow doubt it. And I'm pretty sure that I can't wait to read the book that'll come out in like 4 years.
The books, the movies, all the things. So I think, one of the things when you talk about logistics piece is that, knowing from personal experience, there's a tipping point to what people will deal with, specifically because, former soldiers, whatever, they're used to hardships, right? I mean, if you think about it, like what you choose to do, it's just what's normal for us. These things that you just freaking suck through, where other people would like literally they just walk away. Like, I'm not sleeping here. I need this. I have to take a shower in 40 days or whatever the case is. Right. So there's all of these things that people will accept and won't accept. You could accept bad food, poor sleeping conditions, high stress working conditions, but, you take the ability to communicate, or you take resupply away, or you take, internet, or whatever the case is, and people will walk. Like they have their, they have their tipping point. So it's just an interesting, piece that kind of reared its head here, and it almost caused the overthrow of a superpower.
But
or at least just an internal civil war,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And let's come back to that in a second, but let's think about the idea of logistics for a second. And, if you think about from a protective detail, you have to consider the logistics too. Logistics makes everything run. I mean, of course, tip of the spear, the protectors, all those things, we get that. We both live that, but also like understanding full well, like, like you just said, like, look, teams need to retool. We need to eat. We need to make sure the vehicles are clean. We need to make sure they're fueled. We need to make sure that, all these logistics things that need to happen in concert to assure that we continue to have forward momentum in whatever that is. And, when we were talking about advance work earlier, and when you sit down with your coffee and your piece of paper or your remarkable tablet and start writing down what we need to do, you need to have a column in your planning sheet about logistics.
Right.
And, and I mean, if you've never had a logistics problem your whole life when doing protection work, God bless you. Write a book on that for us. You're gonna, if you haven't, you're gonna. So start considering it now.
That's funny. Yes, that'll be awesome.
What do you mean the car isn't working?
Yeah. What do you mean? What do you mean the driver is in the restroom and we don't know where the keys are? Yeah, one of those things. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Good times.
Yeah. But the other thing I think interesting too, from the protector's point of view, is like, hey, look, we're protecting, Putin and this, the head of state. By the way, are hired mercenaries. Again, that's why I was thinking French Foreign Legion, because France has set them forward to do things in the name of France. Again, I'm not comparing the two, but now, hey, do that Wagner force, Chris, they're on their way to the Capitol. They're not happy with us. They want to have conversation. At what point do we start thinking about, we need to move the president? We need to move the head of state. We need to start, and had they not, supposedly, had the deal not been struck, I wonder what would have happened to Prigozhin's people, Prigozhin's protectors, if you will, or whatever, have they continued to advance forward? We know, would they have gotten nuked? Would they have gotten smoked? How far would they have gone? We'll never know, but.
Right. Well, the interesting thing was that, you know, at least from our perspective, like the one thing they didn't have was air power, right? But you talk about the logistics piece. Well, all you got to do is you seize the airfields and you seize the supply lines, and then at some point, you know, that air power is at a diminishing return, or at least it has longer delays in resupplying itself because it has to go further away. So, you know, there's a lot when you've got a capable fighting force on the ground.
Well, I was thinking about that. If Wagner had air assets, that would have been a very interesting. That would have been very interesting. I think I was reading somewhere, I think the Brits estimated there was somewhere between like 8,000 and 10,000 Wagner mercenaries in that march.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that? Brigade?
Brigade plus, yeah.
Brigade light, brigade plus ish.
Yeah.
And then now he's of course in Belarus. Hopefully he's in a building that has no windows, as a lot of people who don't get along with Russia tend to fall out of windows.
Yep.
But I think it was the Guardian or somebody that had reported that, you know, some of the folks, you know, the Wagner regulars have been given a choice. So like, you can join. The other interesting piece is now that they're going to absorb Wagner into the regular army. What does that mean? I mean, if I'm identify as a Wagnerite, if you will, do I head to Belarus? How many of those people are going to go? What is he going to do? Does he now do the same thing for Belarus? I mean, just
there's
unanswered
a lot, right?
Questions that are interesting.
Yeah. But it's also interesting that this is one of the first times that we've seen is that a commercial third party or commercial entity has essentially threatened first world power. So that part's interesting. And then the next piece is that it's interesting too, because all the Wagnerites, if you will, have been pardoned per se, but they're going after people who, you know, border guards who kind of like left, you know, the 6 dudes on the border that were like, here's 10,000 people in this march. I'm just gonna lift the gate, bro. You know, like,
well, yeah.
like,
I mean, you're them.
You know,
you're them, and they're like, we both know how that plays out. Here's 8,000.
Exactly.
Here's 8,000 jamokes. We're gonna smoke you or open the damn gate. Your choice.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, what was interesting after that, and I'm not saying these are connected or not, Chris, but you had put up, you know, this article about a attempted assassination of Putin. What do we know about that?
Yeah, so apparently there's quite a few, and I was looking to do some research into how many there have been, because as I saw this one pop up, there was a couple where he was. They run several motorcades, so they run a primary motorcade and a backup motorcade, and they realized that he was in his backup motorcade once or twice, so that, you know, they were saying like, hey, there's a lot of inner things, a lot of threats going on internally, right? So with this one, it was the recent one. This was published, I think, yesterday, and it was discovered the day before. Was on a route that he was supposed to take, they found a barge with explosives underneath a bridge he was supposed to take. So, you know, it just gives the importance of advance work. Granted, this is a state, obviously it's, you know, head of an entity, a state entity, but again, the importance of route work, advance work, you know, the fact that they're able to identify these threats, you know, significant threat against the head of a state, obviously, you know, especially one at war and probably not as well liked as some. So it just goes to show us, you know, even though your principal isn't maybe necessarily head of state, you do have to take those threats against them seriously, understanding what the capabilities of your threat actors are, and then align your protective measures appropriately.
And that's all part of like operational critical thinking or three-dimensional thinking, you know, tactical thinking, whatever cool phrase we want to put here. But also, you know, like there's a threat that a threat in some ways represents a risk anomaly that we have to validate or invalidate or circle exit or do something and acknowledge it is there, and not just like blow it off and say, it's probably not a thing.
Right.
Because that is, you know, because that's what you're That's what we're paid to do.
Yeah, be curious.
It's interesting. There was absolutely right. Be operationally curious. That's a good one. You should hashtag that right now. We'll pause while you go on Instagram.
It'll come out like hashtag buy curious. Like, what is happening?
Something I thought was interesting in that article you posted, it was the idea, and I had been thinking about this as we were talking about putting this article up before, is he's been under a constant fear of assassination, obviously since Ukraine war started, or the Ukraine conflict, as I was, as you know, as would Zelensky as well. But there was that photo that popped up where he's physically distanced himself from people in meetings too. I think it sends a message politically, but it also sends a message like, you know, we're gonna have some time and space between all of us, so that if something does pop off, no pun intended, there's time to react. I wonder how much his protection details had to do with that as well. And clearly Putin, you know, being both a judo master and former FSB, you know, he's clearly understands the risks, at least to himself.
Yeah. So interestingly, I guess when he early on in the conflict, when he was meeting with some of his generals, he had at least 50 feet of space between he and some of these generals. Like, these are internal staff members, right? I guess when he
trusted people.
Yeah, trusted advisors. Yeah. So I guess when he met with Macron, there was 10 feet between him. And then recently, because of this coup attempt, he just now, I think yesterday, had photos. He actually went amongst the crowd and then was seen, you know, touching and hugging, you know, normal everyday Russians, which was huge for him because he's quite the germaphobe as well. So, but again, they say it's in response to regaining some of his popularity after the coup attempt.
We have the Wagner thing, and that's hard to keep under state control. You know, even with state controlled media, there's some things in the interwebs age that are hard to probably maintain. That is one of them. And then, of course, now you have this attempted assassination, probably very important if you're his marketing agent or his political officer, to say we need to have things that show you in control and amongst the people. So as you like to say, sporty, my friend.
Yeah, quite sporty, and I would say very sporty for his protective team, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very much so.
Recently here stateside, you know, we often talk about local politicians. We believe they are under duress and threat, and they often don't have the same resources that maybe their bigger cousins in the federal government have for protection. But also, if you're a protector, it's a potential, you know, it's a potential source of work, if you will. And I saw something that happened on the 28th of June. There was a state representative out of Connecticut, and she was coming out of an Eid celebration on the morning of the 28th, I think was a Wednesday. And as she did, a 30-year-old man came up and said, quote, "Who wants to kiss me?" Attempted to put his arm around her, attempted to get her to kiss him. Apparently had some other words were spread. She pulled away, fell down. He ran away. People chased him. And ultimately he was arrested, and, you know, it's being investigated now. But I think this young man's name was, let me find it, Andre Desmond. And he's being held under $250,000 bond with misdemeanor assault, unlawful restraint, breach of the peace, interfering with police, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the interesting thing to me from a protector's point of view is like, okay, sure, there are a lot of people, you know, you see this kind of thing happen all the time, but Chris, I'm making an assumption. I don't know all the details behind it. We certainly will follow this, but I don't think someone randomly walks up. Well, let me rephrase that. It's possible, but not likely that someone's going to randomly pick out a local politician in a post-Eid crowd and walk up to her randomly and say, "Who wants to kiss me?" And then, so my assumption is maybe there was some stalking involved in this, potentially, and some other issues. But clearly, this young man has some things he needs to work through. But it also points out that, these local politicians, and we're in or coming into the election cycle, they are at risk.
Yeah, I mean, unless this guy has like just incredibly bad luck that the only person he went to outside of this was a state representative,
which
right?
Is possible.
Which is possible.
Unlikely, but possible.
Yeah. It just, and here's the funny thing is that often people are like, well, it's not that big of a deal, or, I'm sure now everybody's like, oh, was it really that big of a deal? He just put his arm around you to kiss you, knocked you down, whatever, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's a, it would be considered an attack on anyone, right? So,
yeah.
So we shouldn't say, oh, it's not that big of a deal. We should say, okay, what do we need to do to ensure that the safety of the politician? Again, doesn't mean you need to pull out, Wagner Group light and have 3-car motorcades and helicopter escorts, but again, just having somebody looked after,
sure.
Again, being looked after, not preventing the public from making contact or whatever, but just assuring your safety and security. I think those things make sense.
Well, I think about this. Let's take our protector hat off, if it's even possible, for a minute, and think about political advance, which is different. Similar, but it's advance in its campaign management without a security point of view. However, security is an aspect you should think of. And I would think if I was running a campaign or I was involved with any local politician now, you need to I'm not saying that people don't take security seriously, but you need to ask them questions, because I wonder if we'll find out that this gentleman, who allegedly committed this crime, if he said anything online, or if there was any indication that he was focused on this politician, Khan. And I don't know their situation. I don't know anything about their security apparatus, but I would say there are many out there who are running and don't think about it. Like, everybody loves me, Chris. I'm the local representative. Right. And I'm a good person. And look, everyone has my signs in their yard. This is great. But now every sign in your yard is also a sign to anyone who may be in a different state of mind to suddenly focus on you, or to add you to whatever mental list that they've started.
Right. So, I mean, again, just you got we kind of have to look at the event itself too, right? I mean, 4,000 people is a large amount of people, but it's not a football game, right? It's not a NASCAR race, but it's still enough of a potential target, especially with folks that are celebrating Eid, to go, okay, cool. What does security look like for that event? Again, it's not National Guard level. It's not nothing too crazy, but on some level, it should get some level of a security nod, essentially, right?
And there should be, and I think you make a great point. Whether it's 1,000 or 100,000, every event should have some established risk assessment on it. And you don't necessarily have to have I've got 13 certifications, even if you're the person managing the event, to ask some questions to the people incoming. How are you going to, have you thought about these things? Do we have anybody that would be counter to what we're doing here? Just like you said, be professionally curious. About what's going on.
So we talk about events, right? So in the lighter side of things, not really super light, but there was a star, I think her name is singer. Her name is Bibi, I guess it's Bibi Rexa, who was hit in the face by a thrown phone. Okay, so first off, the size of the phone, it was like a small tablet. I don't know why you would throw your phone to or at
that's expensive, man.
On stage.
You're gonna have to get a new one now.
Super expensive, but I guess people will throw their phone on stage, and the person will sometimes give them a selfie, and then I don't know how you get your phone back, right? But throwing it up there, it hit this woman straight in the face, gave her 3 stitches. You see her go down on stage. Not super helpful. And then obviously all the cops have to do is just wait for your phone to ring and be like, yeah, whose phone is this again? And then roll you up. So that's not helpful. But on the other piece, again, when we talk about protection, very difficult and very challenging to to protect someone, especially on stage from a thrown object, especially as a performer, right? I mean, unless you're gonna have nets up there or whatever the case is, which doesn't really make sense. That piece is and can be very, very challenging. So good luck to all those celebrity protection folks out there. Now you have to worry about people getting, you know, large objects, phones thrown at them, let alone other things, right? But that part's
I think the guy's name was Mulvana, 27-year-old, and he was arraigned Monday in New York City for harassment and assault. I think she's a decent singer. I looked at the video after you brought that up, and man, she gets whacked. And I don't think either of us are saying like, look, you know, you just got to accept what it is and deal with it. But you can't be everywhere unless you put a net. You know, now people are going to say we should put chicken wire and nets up. Like I'm thinking of Blues Brothers. But it definitely is something to be considered. Now, I don't think either of us would say like, oh, somebody, you know, I'm sure there are people somewhere online trolls saying, oh, somebody should have got out there and stopped that. You know, maybe. I mean, I was fortunate enough just to wave my arm once and stop a football from hitting Lou Holtz in the face once. But, you know, I can't say like, Chris, I was there and I dodged the bullet for him literally. But
right.
I think these folks that are out there nugging it out every night on the concert circuit, they're unsung heroes who, again, they've got a lot of things to do with limited resources, and you know, God bless them.
Yeah, it's not, and that's not again. I didn't mean to make light of that. Really, I'm making light of the fact that some jackass threw a gigantic piece of electronic equipment at somebody.
Did you read what he said about it?
No.
He said, and I'll quote, who am I quoting here? NBC News put something out on it. And Malvina then allegedly said, quote, I was trying to see if I could hit her with the phone at the end of the show because it would be funny, end quote. Well, who's laughing now, sir?
Oh my God, that's freaking ridiculous.
He pled, by the way, he pled not guilty.
So, well, here's the thing, right? This other what is it in New York, and I think now in LA, it's like you could pretty much do anything short of rape and murder somebody and not have to post bail. So you got that going for you. Like,
yeah,
what difference does it make?
He was released on his own recognizance, and he's got a temporary restraining order requiring him to stay away from her now. And you know, if he could face up to a year in jail, likely not, but probably I would say if he gets convicted of this, she'll at least have a hefty fine. And you never know, she could come back with a civil suit as well. I mean, it messed her up. She put a picture of her on Instagram, and she definitely has a shiner from it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's not awesome.
People, man. Speaking of that type of, let's shift to the Supreme Court, shall we?
Yeah, it's good.
So there was of course, you know, we had the end of the session for the Supreme Court. They came out with a bunch of things. One thing that we had been watching here, and many protectors and folks in protective intel and threat management, was this Colorado stalking conviction that they basically shut down. So the background of this is this gentleman, Billy Counterman, whom a jury in Colorado found guilty of stalking after he sent more than 1,000 online messages to musician Coles Whalen, appealed to the Supreme Court, saying he was diagnosed with mental illness and did not personally intend for statements to cause fear. Now, to be clear, some of his messages to the singer went from very affectionate to extremely hostile. Some of them said that he wanted Whalen to die and fuck off permanently. Now, Supreme Court voted 7-2 and tossed the Colorado man stalking conviction on Tuesday in a case that defines when states can prosecute, quote, true threats not protected by the First Amendment. Justice Elena Kagan, writing for the majority, said, quote, states must prove the speaker's recklessness for the threat to not be protected, a middle ground between the two parties' proposals. She also said the state must show that the defendant consciously disregarded a substantial risk that his communications would be viewed as threatening violence. Now, why is it important for protectors? Well, you basically just said, hey, I can throw down a mental illness card and probably get away with a lot.
Right.
And, yeah, but Chris, the idea of violence isn't violence itself. Well, I think there's a mental issue to all this as well. If you're receiving more than 1,000 emails from an individual every day that you don't, no, not every day, but if you've received more than 1,000 emails from an individual you don't know, going from, hey, I love you, to fuck off, man.
Yeah.
One could say that's a lot to carry. And it also makes it hard to get things like, you need those things if you're doing threat management or protective intelligence. You need to gather all that evidence so you can get things like temporary restraining orders and go through legal means in order to effectively have a threat management plan.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, there's a lot more to unpack with that. But again, 1,000, I mean, what number is too many? Do you only count the negative ones? I mean, just as a protective intelligence person, the volume and frequency, constitutes a lack of stability. And then, of course, the content would indicate threats, right? And so you can't go, well, of the 1,000, there was only 25 that indicated that he was angry or whatever the case is, right? So those things are, it's challenging. And I think that, like you had talked about earlier, is that the judges kind of potentially hamstrung themselves, because as we've seen, this is shifted to them as well. So, what does that look like for you, Chief?
Well, the Colorado Attorney General, Phil Weiser, condemned it, and he said, quote, "In short, this decision will make it more likely that victims of threats, mostly women, will live in fear and will be discouraged from speaking out against their stalkers, believing there's little they can do to hold those stalkers accountable." So, yeah, we look at this from a protector's point of view, like, hey, Chris, you've got someone like you or me or the multiple protective intel folks out there that are managing a threat around you. Yeah, this makes it difficult for us to do our job. What about the untold thousands of people that do not have protectors to support them?
Right.
That now, like, why doesn't matter? Why bother?
Right. Yeah. And it's unfortunate, right? Because everybody goes, well, why should I do a restraining order? It's worthless. Like, something has to happen in order for this to happen. And preventive protection is not, right. I mean, it's non-existent, essentially.
And what does that do for the the threshold as well of a restraining order? You got to, does it now require, like, hey, look, I got to wait till Chris assaults me?
Right.
I got to wait till he shows up at my property, or I got to wait. And, and does that mean, like, I can do a bunch of stuff and then say, hey, well, I'm just not in my right mindset, and
right. Right.
We both understand there's a lot of mental health involved in stalking issues. We don't take it lightly, but I just think if you're a protector, or you're helping people who are victims of stalking, and you haven't watched this, and I'm sure you have, you should continue to follow what happens. And there is another law that this might affect, and I need to do some more research, because I was looking online and reading what some people had said about this, and a gentleman online who's a public safety subject matter expert said, hey, look, we need to see how this is going to affect Daniel's Law, which was a law passed to protect federal judges from threats. So, it's very ironic. I need to do a little more reading on Daniel's Law. We can, of course, talk about this again on the pod, but I mean, it's, I don't know. I feel like it's a blow. It's a blow for those victims of stalking, and it's a blow for people who are trying to protect them or manage in this space.
Yeah, I agree. Challenging.
Let's go to Florida. Florida, man.
So, interesting piece in Florida. So again, we go back to Russia in Florida. Russia attempted to assassinate a CIA asset in Florida. The person really isn't that important. It's a defector, but it's like the enemy at the gate, right? Is the apparently Russians conscribed, if you will, a Mexican scientist to go, murder, do whatever, this defector. And the guy was he basically tailgated into the apartment complex or compound, and he was found out and then rolled up from there. And then the layers of the onion were peeled back, and it was discovered to be a Russian assassination attempt. The interesting piece is that, again, it wasn't like, hey, this guy was a spy and there's a lot of tradecraft involved. No, the guy just tried to tailgate somebody and then was rolled up, right? So the lowest level of procedures were adhered to and then were enforced, which caused some level of investigation revealing the threat, right? So it wasn't really that we were good; it was really that the guy was bad. So the point is what do we do about being good about what we should be being good about, especially if you're responsible for that level of threat, right? If it was just a corporate thing, then who knows if they'd have caught the guy or not. But they were lucky there. People do say I'd rather be lucky than good. I'd rather be both. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. The individual they tried to assassinate, Potayev, he had given up the names of 11 deep cover Russian agents. And now, we see this idea of what Russia calls wet deeds coming back into fashion. And I love it. Well, I don't love it. I'm curious, if you will, to understand how they either recruited or coerced the scientist Fuentes to attempt to kill this individual. I mean, what was that conversation like? But again, it also, I think it also highlights all the threats aren't always going to come, like you said, from a ninja. They're not always going to come because resources might be, hey, I'm just going to go pay some displaced individual to go try to take go slap Chris. I'll give you $50 if you walk over there and slap Chris Story. I mean, that's a bit of a, I don't want to say a black swan, but that's a bit of a left field action. And, it's for me, if I'm the bad actor, it's only $50. If it wins, it wins. If it fails, it fails. What do I care? But, like you said, would you rather be lucky or would you rather be right? Or, I'm with you. I'd rather be both.
Well, it's interesting because the article really explains like Putin's his look on treason, right? Which is he says the worst crime that could ever be committed, and so people that are treasonous must pay. And so again, it goes to show the level of commitment. Well, the rhetoric shows the level of commitment, right? The actions don't necessarily show the level of commitment. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. But again, like you said, is it the ninja level person that's fast roping in at night from the space shuttle under nods, or is it somebody that looks like the maid or the housekeeper or the house cleaner or whatever the case is? What does that look like, right? Who are you protecting? What are the threats? What is the threat vector? And then again, how does that impact you in the corporate space? What threats are you facing?
Yeah, and I think. Does this individual likely have protection on him? I'm going to go on a limb and say probably not. The Russian individual they tried to assassinate, I doubt he had protection on him, but likely if he was part of a witness protection package, there was something, some type of risk monitoring or risk assessment going on around him. I mean, the other thing I think interesting of this is, if you're running a program, a lot of people I'm running a program for an individual. Some people, if you're working in a corporate space, in kind of parallel to a government space, you might have multiple executives.
Right.
My tier one executive gets, every time she travels, she gets something, or, she gets brought to the office. They have a residential team, all that. But then there's a whole second tier line of C-suite folks that maybe we monitor, and, you can't discount those folks.
Right. I'm going to go on a limb here and I'm going to assume they just didn't have a whole apartment complex full of assets. You know?
Yeah.
like full of defectors. You know?
Also, though, I mean, look, I mean, we've seen this. We've seen threats from Iran towards people who speak out against Iran. This is not the first time that there's been, I think, going back before this time, all the way back to 2007, we know that Russia has attempted. I think even in 2015, they found somebody dead in a Washington D.C. hotel. So, you know, they're not, especially like we were talking about state dinners before. I mean, this stuff plays out. You know, not only does it affect, you know, it may not affect you directly, but it might affect you indirectly. You know, wrong place, wrong time, or you're now hemmed up in an investigation because you just happen to be staying at the same hotel. You know, all these things go into play.
Well, the other thing is again, like we talk about state dinners, or just being in DC or in those environments, right? Like you're rolling through. You know, first off, you can't freaking swing your arm without hitting somebody with a lapel pin, number one. And then number two, if they're not wearing a lapel pin, you just go, oh, that person, and that person, right? And you're like, oh, you guys are all security. Hey, how's it going? Just want to let you know, here's what we're doing. You know, here's what we have going on. Where are you? So we don't step all over each other, right? There's that piece. And then you may or may not know what threats they bring to the table, right? So there's it can get fairly complicated. You got to make sure you're very, 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 very quick and Johnny on the spot.
And it's interesting too, because you have this whole, like, I need to tell you what information I need to tell you so that we can kind of deconflict, but I also don't need to tell you everything going on. You're likely not going to tell me I mean, unless you're networked and you're LinkedIn, no pun intended, and you're good friends and colleagues, and but like, hey, this guy, like you said, a lapel pin. I'm with the Department of the Interior. Okay, maybe.
Right.
Tell you enough to like deconflict our movements, but not enough so that, oh yeah, by after this we're going to go here, we're going to do this, we're going to do something else. I mean, it's such an intricate. Again, I go back to like an orchestra to make sure like I enough about what I'm doing, but not so much that you can get involved in it.
Well, that's the other piece, is that orchestra, there's no conductor, right?
Exactly.
So that's the crazy piece, right? And again, lapel pin, you might be a lapel pin and earpiece. Like, why would you talk to that guy? What is lapel pin and earpiece? Yeah, he works for the hotel. What's wrong with you? Like, he's the valet. Like, what's happening? There's so much going on, right, that you need to make sure you understand.
What's your near and far recognition?
That's it, right? And then and the other piece is that if you think about it, like if I'm a threat actor, all I have to do is stand in the crowd with a lapel pin and an earpiece, and what's anybody going to tell me? They're just going to assume, right?
How many hotels have you gotten around, just by carrying a clipboard?
Pretty much.
I mean, that's a true story. I mean, oftentimes have a folder, open it up. Can I help you, sir? No, I'm good, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to test the waters, roll through DC with 511s and a freaking and a gun case. Well, first off, don't do that. You didn't hear it here, but
do not do that.
You'd be surprised at how far you could probably get, right? At the right time, and just be like, yep, an earpiece, whatever. Nobody's gonna fucking pay attention to you. You're gonna do whatever the fuck you want to because you just look like the part. Yeah. So we got to be. The point is be aware, right? The point is be aware of all the 5 Ws.
Trust, verify, and then trust, and even then
only slightly.
Small t, italicized. But one more thing on this, on the assassination attempt down in Florida, is this like Putin is an old FSB. He prescribes to the old ways. You're absolutely right. He believes in Mother Russia, and it's not me. Multiple authors will come out and say his whole goal is he'd love to see the former Soviet Empire be what it was. So it's interesting, given that we've been talking earlier about, Wagner assassination attempts on Putin, him trying to be shown more in power of the people. Is it too far of a stretch to say we might likely see more activities like this just to show that, look, I'm still in control here?
Yeah, I believe on both sides, right? I mean, I think that the idea and understanding is that his power at this point is in question. So two things need to happen: is that if you're trying to get him out of power, you're going to push to show that he doesn't have as much control. On the flip side of things, he's going to push as much as he can to show that he is in control and he is a man of the people, and he is the person that is that strong persona that's projected, right? The person who belongs at the head of the table for Russia. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how it shakes out.
Last but not least, I mean, things got a little interesting mid-June in Vegas, where the police foiled Stanley Cup terror threat hours before the Golden Knights win. What do we know about that, Chris?
Yeah, so apparently, so this is one of those things where you're kind of excited because the whole see something, say something is kind of coming to fruition a little bit here. This guy, and again, I don't really care who the guy is. He looks like freaking Looney Tunes in this photo for sure. But anyways, he was apparently he's threatening a mass shooting at the Stanley Cup final. The people said that they had stalked him for about a decade, and he'd been showing up to the business and doing all the things, and he posted threatening messages about the game. So, you know, taking him off the map before the game is super helpful. What's interesting is that essentially, if this hadn't happened, you know, if these people hadn't intervened, this attack might have occurred right at a you know, national level event where, you know, absolutely unanticipated, where a lot of hockey fans show up, but not only normal fans, but again, executives, CEOs, celebrities, etc. So it's a large scale event where this person, local person, was you know, focused on disrupting it, you know, with a mass shooting. Had made statements of like he's gonna, you know, he hopes all of Las Vegas Metro is there, hopes Sin City is ready for the Mandalay Massacre Part 2.
Yeah.
You know, I hope that every cop in Las Vegas is there to defend the Golden Knights. Again, pretty gnarly. So,
well,
kudos to the people that reported it and law enforcement.
Well, again, I think, you know, we think about the event security aspect, which is, you know, I would say is an offshoot of executive protection, close protection. A lot of people working in the protection industry also do events, event security, and you know, it's a tough job, and there's a lot to coordinate, a lot of people coming in, out of, a lot of threats to manage. And if you're going into an event, I mean, there are a lot of questions to be asked, because again, yeah, he clearly had been talking about this for a while. And when he was referring to the Harvest Festival back in 2017, the Mandalay Bay shooting, I mean, if you think about it, that had how many, 58 people were shot and or killed during that. So, you know, and that's, again, not necessarily targeting your executive or your people, but they're just targeting an event. So how do you manage through that? What you know, go back to advanced work and discussions with your principal, or if you're doing, you know, you're there and you've got people there telling them what to do, what to look for, where to go. Right. You know, like, did you just let your principal go and say, hey, I'll be back here at 9 to pick you up? You know, what if, like, hey, if something happens, meet me here. Yep. Oh, well, yeah, but Chris, Chuck, you know, I'm going to tell them to meet me there. Well, hey, trust me, if shit's going downhill and you tell them to meet you there and they're going to have to walk a little bit, I guarantee they will.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And, you know, the other thing, what do you do? Like, okay, can you go inside and get them? How would you do that? How would you, you know, we were talking about far and near recognition. How would you do that? For sure. Where would you go to get him? How, you know, all these things to consider.
Yeah. But, well, so I know that you said the last thing I wanted to add one more. I'm going to go off scripture a little bit, but just a PSA, right? Just a PSA, stay off your phones, right? So I don't know if you caught this. I think it happened early last month, where I think it was like a national security advisor or whatever. Somebody had essentially walked into the national security advisor Jake Sullivan's home when agents were on, you know, residential agents were on a residential detail, and you know, and apparently the agents were on their phone, and somebody was some drunk person, right? Not a ninja again, a drunk person was able to walk past the detail again, if they were in place, and basically
How?
ask
I
them
want
to
to
make
know
a
how he.
freaking
I want to know
cheese
how.
sandwich,
Yeah. How did that person? Yeah. How does that? How do you get through that?
I,
You know.
yeah, yeah. How do you get? Here's what I want to know is how do you respond to the call? Hey, can you guys can you go inside and get the intruder out of the refrigerator, please? Like, I'm sorry, what? It's just what happened. Like you just hear this like this cracking, and it's basically your career, just freaking falling apart. So,
Well,
anyways,
yeah.
and this
And
is just the news. We don't know the backstory, but
yeah,
stay off your phone.
thank God he was just a drunk dude. But
Yeah.
it is true. And I mean, we don't, I know there's a big argument, hey, you're right. People have to stay off your phone, stop paying attention. You look around, everyone's got their phone down. I mean, at the end of the day, just go back and listen to our last episode about situational awareness and you're absolutely right. I mean, normally we try to take a, two sides approach to everything, but in this case, something like this, if you're on a detail, stay off your damn phone,
Pretty much.
And if your only way you can communicate on details is text, then put a damn Bluetooth in your ear and just call, old school, that stuff. But awesome. Well, I think that's, we had a couple extra quick hits, but I think maybe we'll save them. I'm definitely watching that Paige Spiranek restraining order against the stalker who was also stalking Olivia Wilde. I mean, spoiler alert, your stalker could be someone else's. Make sure you're paying attention to who else your stalker is stalking, and reach out to that team as well if they have one. But I mean, so when you heading off to the Fortress of Solitude?
I think you get 2 days there. Oh, Fortress of Solitude. Yeah.
See
Here
what I
pretty
did
soon,
there?
next week. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. So I'm very excited about that. I'm looking forward to that for quite some time. So gonna disconnect and reboot, as they say.
Learn a new skill.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll take up whittling or decoupage. No, this is what you should do. I've got it right now. Every day you should post a series of Chris Story does decoupage. And while you're doing it, you could tell a story.
Perfect. That sounds great.
I would pay for that, my friend.
That sounds great.
Especially when it goes wrong and you just like Hulk smash.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. Well, I think with that, by the way, speaking of public service announcement, we've both been traveling a lot. We often close this show by saying, watch your hands, wash your six, or watch your six, wash your hands kind of thing.
Yeah.
Seriously, man. Savages in the bathroom when you're traveling. After you go to the bathroom, wash your hands.
Yeah, that's gnarly.
Disgusting. All right.
Rude.
This has been Conversations in Close Protection. My name is Chuck Randolph. Across the Digital Divide has been the amanuensis of EP himself, Mr. Chris Story. With that, wash your hands, watch your six, and keep your heads down.
Good times.